Don Felder, that guitarist in the Eagles who doesn't get as much press as the other guy. No, not that one. Bernie deserves more respect too. Yeah, that guy. Now, Joe is of course great, but Don is often overlooked. He's outrageously good, versatile style, excellent tone and dynamics, and absolutely perfect bends. But today I want to tell you about a particular perfect solo of his, one that you can learn a lot from beginner to advanced, and one idea in particular that made a huge difference in my play. Now, I know what you're thinking. It must be this solo. That one truly is excellent and instructive too, but despite Don's composing it, I'll forever think of it as a joint effort with him and Joe Walsh. So instead, I think of this perfect solo of Don's. That's right, his incredible solo to One of These Nights. To me, one of the most perfect solos out there, and I can tell you why. See what I did there? Now, we'll go through all of that today, and we'll cover not just the notes, but the ideas and some of the techniques behind the solo as well. Let's go. I like to take a look at the chords and the structure of the solo first. So let's have a look at that. So here are the chords and the structure of the solo. As you can see, it's 16 bars long in total, and what we're going to do is we're going to consider it as 4 chunks of 4 bars, and we'll go through each chunk one at a time. Now, in terms of the chords themselves, all the chords are in the key of G major / E minor, with one tiny exception. So E minor, D6, C major 7, A minor, and B minor 7, those are all in the key of G major / E minor, and it's only this B7 that's out of key, and we'll talk about how that comes into play when we come to it. Now, 2 common scale structures that you might use are the E minor pentatonic scale or the E minor scale. But choosing a scale framework is really just the beginning. You have to go through the solo in detail and then zoom out to get the real deep learning on this one. So make sure you stay tuned until the end. Let's go in detail now for the solo over the first chunk of chords. So here's the first chunk of the solo. And the very first note is a really important one. This one right here, which is a D over that E minor chord. Now, I promise we won't do this for every single note, but this is a really important one. We're playing a D over an E minor chord. That D is a minor 7th. That is, it's 2 frets below the E, right? That's going to turn out to be a theme for this solo. Whenever we play a minor chord, we're going to end on a note that's 2 frets below. That's a minor 7th. Now, the next thing that happens is playing through the D6 and landing on a key note over C major 7, basically using the E minor pentatonic scale. It goes like this. That note right there is a G over that C major 7. And the G happens to be a chord tone. It's the 5th of C major 7. So that's the first chunk of chords. Now, that ending note, G, note that that's not the root of C major 7, so it sounds a little bit open. Just something to keep in mind. But that's just the first chunk of chords. Now it starts to get really interesting. So let's take a look at the second chunk. Here's the second chunk of the solo. Now we're playing over A minor, and over A minor, it does this totally cool string skipping idea. And it ends on this note right here, which over the A minor is a G, you guessed it, the minor 7th of that A minor chord. Next chord is an E minor, and it goes like this. Ending on this note, a D, which is the minor 7 of an E minor chord, right? And then finally this. That's pretty cool. There's 2 consecutive bends. Ending to bend on this, bending from this G to the A over a B minor 7 chord. Again, what's the minor 7 of B minor 7? Well, it's A. We end on the note A. So that's the first half of the solo, and there's already so much in it. Yes, there's scales and chord tones, but there's more. There's this idea of going to the minor 7th, which kind of delays going to the root. That's a pretty interesting thing that's happening at the ends of these lines. All right, now we're going to really pull out the stops. Let's go on to chunk 3. So here's the third chunk, a really nice one. Now, let me turn down the gain. This right here, over the E minor, just a G triad, and over the D, just a D triad. It's always a good idea to break up your single note playing by using double stops or chords, in this case triads. You know I love triads, so that's great. Now over the C major 7, this is played that's just a little E minor 7 arpeggio. And you can think of it as just playing something in the E minor pentatonic scale. Ending on this note E. Now, one little tidbit that makes this an obvious thing to do is that the C major 7 chord is just an E minor 7 triad with a C in the bass. That's an interesting way of looking at C major 7, and so that's why that little arpeggio works. But now we come to the final part, chunk 4. This is where it really has to count, and boy does Don Felder ever come through. Let's look at this in detail. This is the best one. So here's chunk 4, and then we'll break it down. All right, over the A minor. Simple and quite brilliant. Just this. That's the call. Now there's a response. And it's all played down here over the A minor. Then we're going to come up to a crescendo by moving up, and we do this. Now, we've used this minor pentatonic position before, and we've heard this theme of this string skipping before. But this time we come to a crescendo over the B minor. This last note, that's a B. And there it is, finally resolving, playing that B over that B minor 7. Or actually it's a B7, but now you know why it doesn't matter at the end of this. And to me, that's the biggest takeaway from this solo. Yes, use a scale that fits the chords. Yes, play chord tones. That's all important. But sometimes holding back to unplaying that root and finally resolving until the bitter end can make a really big difference. And in this solo, it's what makes it perfect, in my opinion. But for another perfect solo, one that's simpler and quite different than this one, click here. It's another perfect solo that makes a great song even greater. So click here. I'll see you in the next video, and I'll see you on down the road.